to be able to learn together. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you in person this morning, but at least Baruch Hashem, we get the opportunity to continue our limud virtually. So today's daf is Daf Hey, page 5. Daf 5, Maseches Chagigah. Begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month. All the shiurim and drushos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Zechariah Ben Betzalel, Dinah Bas Reb Dov, and to thank Art and Sherry Miller for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month in memory of Art's brother Richard Miller, Reuven Ben Betzalel V'Rachel. We hope that on the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshamas and aliyah and the families in Acham. And also with that, let us begin. So as I mentioned, today's daf is Daf Hey. We are actually picking up on the bottom of Daled Amud Beis. This is where we left off. 6 lines up from the bottom. A really beautiful Gemara. Rav Yosef Kimate Lahaikra Bochi. So remember again, we started this theme yesterday of these great Rabbanim arriving at these psukim that presented them with such profound theological issues that literally again they began to cry. I shouldn't say issues like in a bad way, but just difficulties that overwhelmed them to the point that they cried. So the Gemara says, Rav Yosef kimati lahaikra bachi. When Rav Yosef came to the following pasuk, he cried, V'yesh nispa b'lo mishpat. So the Gemara here quotes from the pasuk from Mishlei, V'yesh nispa, which literally means there could be one who is collected. Collected, of course, in this context means death. There could be one who dies without justice, one who dies without mishpat. Says the Gemara, what does this mean? Amar mi'ika da'azo below zmaneh. So interestingly, Rav Yosef said, is it possible that a person could die not in their right time? In other words, what's this idea? The Pashtos, a person leaves this world at the appointed time. How could it be that a person leaves this world and it's not their time? To which the Gemara says, no, it could happen. Ki had Rav Bibi bar Abaye have a shchiach gabe malach hamavis. This is interesting. Rav Bibi bar Abaye apparently spent some time with the malach hamavis. It must have been an interesting relationship. He sends them with the Malach Amar Lei L'Shluchei, Zil Aisili, Miriam Megadla Seir Nashya. So Rav Bibi observed the following exchange. The Malach Hamaves said to his Shaliach. So this is also an incredible yisod. The Malach Hamaves doesn't do everything himself. He has shluchim, he has agents. Again, the Malach Hamaves is responsible. There's a lot on his plate. So Lamaisa, again, he has to find he has support staff, which of course, by the way, is an incredible yisod in life, that if you want to be successful at whatever it is that you do, you have to surround yourself with the right support team to enable and to amplify your success. Even Lahavdil, Malach Hamaves doesn't do everything himself. He says to his Shaliach, Zil Aisili, go and bring me the neshama of Miriam, the woman who braids the hair of other women. Miriam the braider. This was her name. This is how she was known. Bring me the neshama of Miriam the braider. So the Gemara says, Azal Aisili Miriam Magad Ladardiki. Shliach made a mistake. And the Shliach instead brought the neshama of Miriam, the one who was in charge of young children. So he brought in the Miriam, instead of Megadla Seir Nashya, the one who braids the hair of women, Megadla Dardiki. She ran a gan. She ran a nursery. Miriam, the nursery school, the playgroup leader. So the Shliach brought the wrong neshama. Amrlei, Anna Miriam Megadla Seir Nashya Amrlecha. So Malach gets upset. He says to the Shliach, I told you, I gave you explicit instructions. I told you to bring the neshama of Miriam, the one who braids the hair of women, not Miriam, the one who raises or watches over children. Shliach says, no problem, I'll just return the neshama of Miriam, the playgroup leader. I'll return her neshama. Keep it easy. Malcham says, no, it doesn't work that way. Once you brought her neshama, she's here. She's added literally again to the tally of the dead. Ella, hechi yachlisla. So Rabbi says, Malach Hamaves, take someone not in their right time. Hava Nikita me'asra biada, v'hava kashargra, top of hay, umachriye tanura. So listen to this. So what happens? So the Malach Hamaves says as follows: Havas Nikita me'asra biada. Look at Rashi. Last Rashi and Dalam and Beis. This Miriam, who was the Megadla Dardiki, this Miriam was the babysitter, the nursery school teacher, the playgroup leader. So she was holding a poker. right? She was going ahead and holding the poker. She was stirring stuff in the oven, the coals in the oven, and she was holding a poker in her hand. And what happened? Top of hay. Umecharia tanura shakalta va'anchasa agaba dekara. She went ahead and she accidentally placed the poker on top of her foot. Kadcha. As a result, she got burned. Ve'isra mazla. And her mazel was weakened. And therefore, again, va'aisise. And therefore, her neshama was taken. So what's happening over here is something very interesting. So Rabibi is bothered by Malach HaMavis. How can you take someone not in their appointed time? To which the Malach HaMavis says, you're right. Except when a person does something that weakens their mazel. Or in this particular case, when a person does something which places themselves in mortal danger, that gives the Malach HaMavis a little bit of a Pesach, of an opening to be able to take that neshama. In other words, that normally there's a certain mazel, there's a certain protection that a person has. But when a person places themselves, knowingly or unknowingly, in a dangerous situation, it leaves them open for greater danger. This is the idea, by the way, why we don't put ourselves b'makom sakana. We don't put ourselves in a place of danger. Besides the fact that there's a biblical obligation, Nishmarta ol nafsho seichem, I have to watch over my life. But in addition to that, when a person is in a precarious state, it just opens the door for other negative and dangerous things to occur. So Malach HaMavis says, listen, this Miriam, she burnt herself. So because she burnt herself, her mazel was compromised. And because her mazel was compromised, I was able to take her neshama. Amrli Rabibi Bar Abaye, Islucha Reshus Lemi Avid Hachi. So Rabibi Bar Abaye says to Malach HaMavis, do you ever shus to do this? Do you ever shus to take him neshama not at its right time? Amrli V'lo Ksiv Yeis Shnispa B'lo Mishpat. So Malach HaMavis quotes the pasuk in Mishlei to Rav Bibi. And so Rav Bibi, doesn't the pasuk say, there are some who are collected even without judgment, meaning that there are some who leave this world even though it's not their right time. So Rabbi Bibi says, Amrli v'hoksiv, dar holech v'darba. But the pasuk says, Rabbi Bibi says, it's incredible, by the way, he's getting into an exchange with the Malach HaMavis. But the pasuk says, a generation comes, a generation goes, which sounds like each and every generation, each and every person has their defined time in this world. And they're not taken from this world ultimately again until their time is up. So how can you take this Miriam Magad Ledardiki earlier than her time? Amrale, Darina Luhu Ana Adamalu Luhu Lidara Vahadar Mashlimna Le Leduma. This is an incredible Gemara. So ultimately again, so the Malach HaMavis says to Rabbi, listen, here's what I do. When someone is taken not in their right time, there's a malach by the name of Duma. Duma is in charge of the dead. Duma is in charge of the dead. When the neshama has been taken from this world early, the Malach HaMavis says, I allow the neshama to travel with me around the world, and only after its intended lifespan comes to an end, only then do I hand the neshama over to Duma. So it's almost as if the Malach HaMavis says, they don't experience complete death until the amount of time that they were supposed to live officially comes to an end. So let's say this Miriam Megad Dardiki was supposed to live until 90. The Malach HaMavis took her when she was 80. So the Malach HaMavis says, for 10 years, I allow her to come with me, accompany me along my journeys in the world, and only when she reached 90 do I hand her neshama over to Duma, who is in charge of the neshamas, or of the dead, I should say. Amrle sof shanya my avarta. So our baby says, but no, what do you do with the 10 years? In other words, there's 10 years that Miriam Magad Ledardiki, for argument's sake, there's a certain amount of time that she was supposed to live that she doesn't end up living. So what do you do with those years? But say, listen to this Gemara. So Amr ikatzur mirabanan de ma'avir b'milei mosifna lohu lei v'havi chalufei. So the Malach HaMavis says something amazing. He says, if I find a Talmud Chacham, the ma'avir b'milei, Rashi says over here, ma'avir amidosav. If I find a Talmud Chacham who is a forgiving individual, a yielding individual, a person who does not exact retribution even when he is wronged, I give him those years. And we'll see, you hear this, how incredible this is? First of all, again, a person makes himself into a Talmud Chacham, that's important. But being a Talmud Chacham is not enough. You have to be Mavri al Midosav. You have to be a Bal Midos Tovos. You have to have the right character traits. And at least in the eyes of the Malach HaMavis, the greatest character trait that a person could possess is to be a yielding individual. Ma'avir al midosav, a vatron, a forgiving, a yielding person. Malach HaMavet says, when someone is collected from this world before their time, if I find a Talmid Chacham who is a forgiving and yielding individual, I give him those years. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Rabbi Yochanan will say so much to say on that story, so much to say just about the dynamic of death, the dynamic of premature death. But I want to, again, how the Malach HaMavet looks, how death works, doom works, no idea. But the notion that what you could gain in life by, number one, making yourself into a Talmid Chacham, and number two, being a forgiving and yielding individual, literally, it could add more years onto your life. Incredible. Rabbi Yochanan kimati lahaikra bachi. Rabbi Yochanan, when he would get to the following pasuk, he would cry, "Vatisiseni bo levalo." So the pasuk says over here, pasuk says, "Vatisiseni bo levalo chilam." So listen to this. So the pasuk says, it's quoting over here from Eov, "Vatisiseni bo levalo chilam." Literally, he incited me to swallow him up for nothing. What does this mean? Eved sherabo masisin lo v'niseis takana yishlo. So ultimately, again, a servant whose master is incited against him and then tests him, is there any remedy for such an individual? So Rabbi Yochanan felt overwhelmed by the notion, ultimately, again, here that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets incited against us. And then ultimately, again, we get incited against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gemara goes right to the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan kimat lahaikra bachi. Rabbi Yochanan got to the following pasuk, he cried, Hein bikdoshav lo ya'amin. So this is actually an incredible pasuk. Hein bikdoshav lo ya'amin literally translated means, even in his holy ones, he does not believe. What does this mean? I bikdoshav lo ya'amin. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't believe in his holy ones, so the Gemara says, b'man ya'amin, then who should he believe in? So this is actually an overwhelming pasuk, because what the pasuk seems also from Eov, what the pasuk seems to highlight is that at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't have full trust in anyone. Even in those who are holy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't have full trust. So the Gemara tells a story. We'll see what it means in just a moment. Yom Echad Havaka Azil Ba'archa. One day Rabbi Yochanan was walking on the road. He saw that there was a man who was gathering figs. Shavik Hanach Dimatu, Vishakal Hanach Delo Matu. And interesting enough, figs, he said he did not eat the ripened figs, instead he took the figs. So Rabbi Yochanan sees this. Amarle Hani, so the Gemara says, Amarle, Lav Hani Ma'alan Tvei. Why are you taking the unripe figs? Doesn't it make sense to take the ripened figs with you? Amarle Hani La'archa Ba'ina Lahu. Hani Natran, Vahani Lo Natran. So the man says to Rabbi Yochanan, no, I'm traveling, and therefore I need the food to keep for a while. The ones that are ripened, they're ready to eat now, they're not going to last for the journey. The ones that are unripened, those are the ones that last for the journey. Rabbi Yochanan said this, and he said, Amar Hainu Dichsiv Hein Bikdosha Lo Ya'amin. That's the meaning of the pasuk, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't even believe in his holy ones. Meaning what? Look at Rashi. Hainu Dichsiv Hatovos Yare Penyirkavu Afa Bachur Matzadikim Nechaz Lemisa Penyachto. So this is interesting. I think the Pasha Pshat of the Gemara is Hein Bikdoshav Lo Yamin is there is no guarantee of continued spiritual success. You know, the way it works in Ruchnis, you could do the right thing for a prolonged amount of time, but that is no guarantee that you're going to continue to stay on the proper derech for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, it happens. A person, I do the right thing for 5 days, for 5 years, for 50 years, but there's no guarantee that I can't fall off the wagon. There's no guarantee that I can't mess up. There's no guarantee that just because I've been a holy individual up until this point, that I can't chas v'shalom lose my way. That's the idea of hein bikdoshav lo ya'amin. You see, emuna, we have emuna in HaKadosh Baruch Hu because the Ribono Shel Olam is consistent and constant. Hein bikdoshav lo ya'amin is that man is not really capable of that same level of constant consistency. That even though I'm ripe right now, that which is ripe right now could spoil the next day. Rashi understands that it means something a little bit different. Rashi understands that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes the righteous from this world early before they can mess up. That sometimes when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that someone is holy right now, and if they continue to live, they're going to mess up, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes the neshama right now before they have the opportunity to do something wrong. And we have examples of this, right? The Torah is filled with examples like this. Noach, right? Manoach in the end of Sefer Bereshis was an individual who was collected before his time. We have examples of this, of where HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes people's lives early because now they're righteous. But if they stay in this world much longer, unfortunately, they're going to lose that righteousness. Ini, is that true? Vahu Tamid Adahu B'Shu, said Rabbi Alexandri, V'Shachiv Adazutar. Yet there was this Talmud Chacham who lived in the neighborhood of Rabbi Alexandri, and he passed away when he was young. V'Amar, I boy hai mirabanan hava chaye. And he ultimately, again, interestingly enough, and Rabbi Alexandri said, if this Bacher wanted to live longer, he could have lived. Meaning what Rashi says, Lios holich b'derech tovim hayachaye. That apparently he made some bad decisions. And those bad decisions cost him his life. But had he continued to choose to live on the straight and narrow, he could have had life. To which the Gemara says, but one second. See, what's interesting about this is as follows. Rabbi Alexandri attributed the premature death of this Bacher to the fact that he had fallen off the right path. But says the Gemara, Vim Isa, Dilma mehen bikdoshav lo yamin hava. How do you know? Maybe Rabbi Alexandri, maybe this Bacher was absolutely righteous, and he died in an absolute state of righteousness. And the reason he died early was because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to prevent him from falling off the right path. To which the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Alexandri knew this boy. He knew this Bacher. And unfortunately, again, this Bacher was an individual, literally again, Mevai Barabosa means he kicked his Rebbeim, which means he rejected the authority of his Rebbeim. So somebody who rejects the authority of his Rebbe is not really open to learning. Right? Someone who rejects the authority of his Rebbe is not really a Mekabel. So Rashi says over here, Mevai Barabosa Hava, Rabbi Alexandri Hayamakirbo, Shalo Hayaminakdosh. Rabbi Alexandri knew this kid, knew this Bacher, and he was not of the Kedoshim. And Rabbi Alexandri understood that he went ahead and he experienced his premature death as a result of his rejection of the authority of his Rebbeim. Profound Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan kimat lahaik rabachi. Rabbi Yochanan, when we get to the following pasuk, he would cry. So the pasuk over here, V'karafti alechem lemishpat, ba'yisi eid memaher, ba'mechashvim, ba'menafim, ba'mishram l'sheker, ba'oske, u'ba'oske schar sachir, almana v'yasom. So the pasuk says over here that literally, I will hasten to bring you to judgment, and I will be an aid. I will be an aid who will quickly testify against the sorcerers, the adulterers, those who swear falsely, those who withhold wages. So listen to this. So Rabbi Yochanan, when he read this pasuk, he said, "Evet shiraba mekarvo lodono amar la'ido takani yeshlo." If you have a servant whose master quickly brings him to justice and is quick to testify against him, is there any takana? Is there any remedy? In other words, what do you do when HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself says that he's going to testify against you for your wrongdoing? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. There's another, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, by the way, there's another scary aspect of this pasuk. What's the scary aspect of this pasuk? That the pasuk lumps together what we would call minor infractions with major infractions. How so? So remember again, if you look at this pasuk, so you have again, you lump together sorcerers, adulterers, and those who withhold the wages of laborers. Now again, I would put sorcery and adultery in a different category than withholding wages. Withholding wages is bad, but it doesn't seem to be the same level of severity. But ultimately, Yochanan ben Zakkai says, you see that in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it does have the same level of severity. Incredible. Amrei Shlakish, Kalamata dino shel ger, kilomata dino shel mala. A person who perverts the judgment of a ger, of a convert, is as if he perverted the very judgment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shneimar, umate ger, so we read it mate ger, but it can read mati, those who go ahead and pervert me. So one who wrongs the ger is as if he wrongs HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible. Rabbi Chanina, Shabbos said, but there's good news. Rabbi Chanina says, this is perhaps one of the most important and I think life-affirming Gemaras. Whoever goes ahead and does something wrong, but then immediately regrets it, Mochel lo miyad, is immediately forgiven. Shene emar velo yiruni. Pasuk says they don't fear me. What can we infer from that? Hayiruni mochlin lahamiyad. If we fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are immediately forgiven. The Rabbi said it's an interesting idea. So the Gemara says again, if I commit an Aveira and regret it immediately, I am forgiven immediately, right? Or I should say, I regret it, I'm forgiven immediately. Which I will say, first of all, is such a profound yesod, because we learn these Gemaras. And yes, the stakes are high when we make mistakes, but we should never chas v'shalom think that there's ever such a thing as a mistake that you can't get out of, or that there's a mistake that there's no redemption or rehabilitation for. That's the Gemara says. We make mistakes. You all make mistakes, but if I regret the mistake, mochel lo miyad, I am immediately forgiven. Now, remember when the Gemara says if mischaret that you have remorse is the beginning, right? Remorse is not the end. Remorse is the first step in tshuva, or one of the first steps in tshuva. The truth is, the first step is really akaras achet, a recognition that I've sinned. After the recognition, then comes the remorse. But remorse and recognition very often are two sides of the same coin. So really what the Gemara is saying over here is a person commits an aveira and finds the courage to do tshuva. If you do a sincere tshuva, you will be forgiven. That is a guarantee that the Ribbon Shalom makes to us. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan came out to the high Rabbi Yochanan got to the following pasuk, he would cry, Ki es kol ma'aseh Elokim yavi b'mishpat, al kol ne'elam. This is incredible. Because everything that one does against God, the Baruch Hu will bring judgment, al kol ne'elam, even upon that which is hidden. Eved sherabo shokel o shkagos kizdonos. So I will say, the Gemara's understanding Ne'ala means even those things you don't know about. Right? Even the things you don't know about, Chadash Baruch Hu still holds me accountable for, which means Hashem holds me accountable both for my intentional Averis as well as for my unintentional Averis. So again, Rabbi Yochanan says, who could escape such a judgment like this? Okay, to hold me accountable for my intentional Averis, I hear, but that I'm also held accountable for my unintentional Averis. It's hard. It's hard, to which the Gemara says, Ma'al kol ne'alam. What does it mean, al kol ne'alam? Even that which is hidden. This is interesting. Amarav zeh ahorikina b'fnei chavero v'nimas ba. This refers to someone who kills a louse in front of his friend, and his friend is repulsed by this. So Shmuel says, no, it refers ultimately to zeharok b'fnei chavero v'nimas, someone who spits in front of his friend, and his friend is repulsed. What does this mean? You would think that the Torah is just that the pasuk is just talking about averos ben adam lamakom, right? Averos that I commit between myself and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what's being added over here, Rav Shmuel are adding, is a person who just doesn't take into account the dignity of their fellow. A person who's just totally ignorant and totally uncaring about the feelings of their fellow person. You kill a louse, which is not an aveira. You're spitting, not an aveira. But how could I be so oblivious to the feelings of those around me? Such a person who lives a life of obliviousness to the feelings of those around them is held accountable by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara goes weiter. My im tov ve'imra. What does it mean when the pasuk says if for good and for bad? Shabbos said the Gemara refers to this as the follows: that there can be an act that is good, but that very act turns bad. What's an example of an act that's good and turns bad? So this is incredible. Someone who gives tzedakah to a poor person publicly. I give tzedakah to a pauper publicly. Because the Rabbi Yanai saw a man who gave tzedakah to a pauper, but he gave tzedakah in public. You would have been better off not giving him tzedakah than giving him and embarrassing him. The idea being, if you give tzedakah to a pauper in public, you embarrass them. Right now, suddenly again, you make their entire plight a matter of public knowledge. So again, so that's im tov imra, something that is good. Tzedakah is good. But if tzedakah is done the wrong way, then suddenly it becomes bad. Which I will say, such an incredible yesod, that in life, it's not just about what you do, but it's about how you do it. So you can have a ma'aseh of tzedakah, which is a good act to give tzedakah, but you give tzedakah in the wrong way, and suddenly it's a bad act. Not just what you do, but it's how you do it as well. Another example of something that is good that could become bad is a man who gives tzedakah to a woman in private. Because Because when a man gives money to a woman in a private setting, chas v'shalom, people could interpret that as maybe being payment for something illicit. So Rava Amar Rava says, Rava says it also refers to someone who sends meat home to his wife on Erev Shabbos when the meat has not been properly mechutach. Mechutach means cut up. In other words, that the prohibited fats or gid hanosha, sciatic nerve, has not been removed. Because what's the concern? A man sends a piece of meat home, places an order in the butcher, sends it home Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos, everything is chaotic. Erev Shabbos, everything is busy, right? This is not like a new thing that Erev Shabbos is busy. It's always been busy. So a man sends home a piece of meat and the meat is not properly prepared. The wife gets it, her husband sent it home. She doesn't think that maybe there's fats or maybe there's a sciatic nerve. She just cooks it up and it turns out that she's cooking something non-kosher. We'll say first white line on the bottom. I bet Rava used to go ahead and send meat that didn't have the fat or the sciatic nerve removed. He would send it home to his wife on Erev Shabbos. Shani bas Rav Chisda de kimli begava de bekia. Ultimately, Rava was married to the wife of to the daughter of Rav Chisda, and the daughter of Rav Chisda was proficient in these things. So she would see the piece of meat, she would know if the fats or the sciatic nerve weren't removed, and she would make the necessary arrangements. Rabbi Yochanan kimat lahai bach, and Rabbi Yochanan would get to the following pasuk. He would cry, "V'haya ki timsaena oso raos rabos vitzaros." It will be that these raos rabos, these terrible, great number of bad things and sorrows will find you. Eved sherabo mamsilo raos vitzaros takana yeshlo. Tell me, a servant whose master prepares for him raos, bad things, sorrows, afflicting things, is there any remedy for him? My ra'os vitzaros. What are the ra'os and tzaros referred to in the pasuk? So the Gemara says, Amarav ra'os shena'asos tzaros zulazu. Sometimes Chadash Baruch Hu visits ra'os, and the nature of the negative things are tzaros. Even create a tzara one to the other. What's an example of this? Kegon zibura va'akrava. So Rashi points out to her something very interesting, that if one gets stung by a bee versus one gets stung by a scorpion, they're treated in two different ways. You treat a scorpion bite with warm water and a bee bite with cold water. Okay, the problem is cold water has an adverse impact on a scorpion bite, and warm water has an adverse impact on a bee bite. So this is ra'os, two terrible things that ultimately are tsaros zulazu, that ultimately exacerbate one the other. So the Gemara goes out there. Shmuel Amar Zamamtzi lo ma'os la'ani b'shas dochko. It's very interesting. Shmuel says, what are ra'os v'tsaros? This is someone who gives money to a poor person when he's desperate. This is really quite fascinating. You see, Shmuel says like this. The idea is to go ahead and give money. This is actually, Rashi says this is going back on im tov ve'imra. When the pasuk says something that is good could also become bad. What's an example of something that is good that has become bad? Giving money to a pauper when he's desperate. Meaning what? See, when a pauper is desperate, he has to get what he needs, and he has no time to look for a bargain, right? He has no time to figure out how to use the money wisely because he's in acute crisis right now. It's interesting because Shmuel says the ideal of tzedakah, and this is really quite fascinating, is to give money to a person who needs it before the need becomes acute, so that they have the ability to be a bit more strategic with the funds. But if you give money to a person who's already in crisis, so again, the Shmuel saying over here, that's im tov imra, that's something good that becomes bad. They're going to use the money to alleviate the crisis, but they cannot use the money strategically. So again, this is what people say, that sometimes there is no money to go ahead and purchase wheat, but there is money ultimately again to hang in the basket. Hanging in the basket represents going to waste. So sometimes again, before the person was in crisis, they had an opportunity to go ahead, if they had an infusion of funds, to use it strategically. Now they're in crisis. In crisis mode, a person rarely has the opportunity to be strategic. And by the way, it's two interesting yisodos. So first of all, it's an interesting concept for Hilchos Tzedakah, that when possible, the goal is to help a person before the crisis becomes acute. Help them, you know the crisis is going to come, but it's not here yet. So if they have the money, if they have the eitzah, if they have the guidance, maybe they could avert crisis, be a bit more strategic and stay on their feet. Whereas if you only help when crisis strikes, often once there's crisis, again, the ability to be strategic and the ability to help in a more comprehensive way is often lost. Now it's just about saving the person from drowning. But even aside from tzedakah, what an incredible life lesson. See, all too often, we don't think about life and we don't think about the choices we make or the direction we want to take until we're forced to think about life, which is often in the midst of crisis. The goal in life is to be strategic. The goal in life is to think ahead. The goal in life is not to wait until I'm in a crisis moment to figure out, what should I do with my life? What should I do with myself? Which direction should I go in? The goal is to be able to think about all of those things. Ma chovasi ba'olami. What is my obligation in this world? What should I be doing? What should I be focusing on? Where should I be putting my time, my money, my efforts? And the goal is to think about those things before crisis hits. To be forward-thinking people when we have the luxury and the bandwidth of being forward-thinking. Because once I'm in crisis, the ability to be a forward-thinking person is very often not there. When I'm in crisis, all of my energy, all of my time, and often all of my resources are directed just to keeping me afloat. An incredible yisod. V'charapi bayamahu v'azavtim v'istarti panai mehem. So let's remember again, the pasuk says that literally again I will get angry. Kadosh Baruch Hu said, I will get angry at them on that day, and I will leave them, I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them. Amarav bardala bar Tav Yomi Amarav. It's actually a very profound Gemara. Whoever doesn't experience Hester Panim, whoever doesn't experience a time, this is to me both as a nation, as individuals, whoever doesn't go through a period of time of Hester Panim where they feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has shielded his face from them, they're not part of Klal Yisrael. Whoever ultimately again has never experienced that ultimately they are subject to the whims of other nations or other people, is not a member of Klal Yisrael. By the way, we'll say, understand the profundity of this Gemara. What the Gemara is saying is, do you know what it means to be a Jew? Do you know what it means to be part of Klal Yisrael? That you're going to experience times as an individual and as part of a nation where you wonder where God is in your life. That's part of being a member of Am Yisrael. You know what it means to be part of Am Yisrael? That there are going to be moments where others are going to take advantage of you. There are going to be times in life where you are at the whim, where you're at the mercy of others. This is what it means to be a member of Klal Yisrael. Now, I know you hear this and you say to yourself, my gosh, this is what it means membership has its privileges, right? This is what it means to be a member of Klal Yisrael. But I will say, it's an incredible yisod. Because ultimately, again, our job as Jews is to have emunah. But emunah is only something that is meaningful when it's tested. Right? If life always goes my way and everything is always fine and there are never any challenges, then there's no great chap in having emunah. It's obvious. Of course I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu if everything goes my way. What makes emunah meaningful is that it's tested. What makes belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, relationship with Hashem, something special is because there are times where I wonder, what is going on over here? What is happening? Keli, lama azaftani. Hashem, where did you go? That's the Gemara means. How do you know you're a member of Am Yisrael? When your emunah is tested. And how is my emunah tested? Because there are periods of time when I feel like I need HaKadosh Baruch Hu so badly, and he's absent. And when is my emunah tested? Or I feel that he's absent. When is my emunah tested? When I feel like I'm really taken advantage by others and I don't understand how did Hashem let this happen. So says the Gemara, that's what it means to be part of Klal Yisrael, to have your emunah tested. Because when my emunah is tested and I come through the test and I still believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when my emunah is tested and I come out of the test, I come out of the adverse circumstances and I still feel connected, I still feel in love, I still feel like I am one with the Ribbon Shalom, that's emunah. But it's only meaningful if it's subject to a test. It's only meaningful if it's ultimately subjected to adversity. Whoever doesn't experience periods of Hester Panim, of feeling forsaken and left alone by Hashem, whoever doesn't have experiences of being taken advantage and maybe sometimes even hurt by others, you're not a member of Klal Yisrael. What it means to be a Jew is to possess incredible emunah. But to possess incredible emunah, that emunah has to be tried and tested. Incredible. It's supposed to say top line, Hamid base 5b. Amr li Rabbanan the Rava. So the Rabbanan said to Rava, Mar lo behester panim isay, v'lo ba v'haya le'achol isay. So listen to this. So the Rabbanan said to Rava, Rava, I don't know, we look at your life, and you look like you have a pretty happy life. Right? It doesn't look like your Amunah is ever tested, right? It looks like, again, Baruch Hashem, you're happy, you're successful, you have everything. Sa'ah, you're never tested. So Rava says to them, Amrle miyaditu kama mishadarna betzina beishavar malka. If you only knew how much I had to pay off the king, right? If you only knew how much money I spent in bribes to the kings and to his officials to keep me safe, to keep my family safe, to keep Klal Yisrael safe, so nevertheless, the rabbis were distrustful of this, and they felt that Rava was never really tested. Rava never experienced any adversity. So therefore, again, adahachi shadar de beishabra malko v'garbuhu. As a result, ultimately, again, that the rabbis felt that Rava was never really tested. The king Shapur Shavar Malka came and kind of took all of Rava's money. Ha'amra hainu desanya amra b'shem ben Gamliel. Wherever Chazal, wherever the rabbis placed their eyes, again, in a sense of distrust or a sense of punishment, ultimately, again, there's either death or poverty. So this is really interesting. So I'm going to say there's so much to talk about with this in terms of like Rava didn't do anything wrong, but you see over here that the words of tzaddikim always have a kiyum. The words of tzaddikim always have an effect. And here, again, the rabbis felt that Rava was espousing an idea that ultimately, again, he did not really personify. And as a result, ultimately, again, he loses out financially. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says as follows. Amar Rava, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Afani, Avapishe, Starti Panai Mehem Bechalom Adaber Bo. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to us, even though there are moments where I hide my face from you, I will always speak to you, at least in a dream. So the Rav Yosef Amar Yado Netuya Alinu. So Rav Yosef said, so in other words, even in periods of Hester Panim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hidden, even in those times, HaKadosh Baruch Hu still finds a way to communicate with us. Rav Yosef says, even in times where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hidden from us, his protective hand is still extended upon us. Shnei Amar, Ubetzel Yadi Kisisicha. Good. So Bossi Gemara tells an amazing story. Rabbi Yoshua Ben Chananya, Havi Kesar. One time, Rabbi Ben Chananya was in the palace of the Caesar. Achvi leahu apikursa amad da'adjunhu mare le'apemine. So there was a particular apikores who was there in the palace together of Rabbi Ben, and they're in the presence of the Caesar. Now Rashi says over here, apikursa, third line from the top, she'ena ma'aminu divrei razal kigon sedukim. What's an apikores? Someone who doesn't believe in the words of Chazal. That's an apikores. So there was this apikores together with Rabbi Ben Chananya in the palace of the Caesar. And ultimately the apikores gestures to Rabbi Ben Chananya, and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has turned his face away from you. Ach vilei yado netuya alenu. So the Rabbi Ben Chananya, he signals back, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand is still upon us. Maybe he turned his face away a little bit, but his protective hand is still upon us. So Rabbi say, so the Caesar sees them gesturing to each other. I'm going to case Rabbi Shua, my ach vilacha. So Caesar says to Rabbi Shua, tell me, what did this guy gesture to you? So he said, so my ach vilacha, amadajinu mare la'apemine. He gestured to me that God has turned his back on us. Va'ana machvina le yadonatiya alenu. And I gestured back to him, but God's hand is still upon us. Amar lahu mina my achvisle. So the Caesar then turns to the apikores, says, apikores, no, what did you gesture to Rabbi Shimon Chananya? So amar da'ajunu mare mine. I gestured to him that their God had forsaken them. Umay achvilacha. And then the Caesar says to the apikores, and what did Rabbi Shimon Chananya gesture back to you? So lo yedana. So the apikores said, I don't know. I actually don't know what he gestured back to me. So listen to this. The Caesar said, Amru, Gavra de lo yada my machvile b'machug yichavi kamei malka. Tell me, is it appropriate to gesture in front of the Caesar when you don't know what you're gesturing? Afkua v'katlu. They took the apikores out and they killed him. So an incredible turn of events. In other words, the apikores and a right Rabbi Shimon Chananya. So the apikores is saying your God has forsaken you, and Rabbi Shimon Chananya says God's face may be hidden, but at the end of the day, His protective hand always extends upon us. And amazingly enough, what's the end of the story? The apikores is executed by the Caesar. Incredible. So we'll say first of the widest lines. Ki kanicha nafshi Rabbi Shimon Chananya. when Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya was about to pass away, Amr li Rabbanan Maite Havi Elan Me Apikorsin. What's going to happen to us with the Apikorsins? Apparently, Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya was the great champion of the Jewish people when it came to the Apikorsin, right? He was always the one who protected Klal Yisrael when Apikorsin tried to start up. So now, Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, you're about to die. What's going to happen to us with the Apikorsim when you die? Amar lahem avda itza mibanim nisrecha chachmasam. When wisdom is lost from the sons, ultimately the wisdom grows putrid. Kevan sha'avda itza mibanim, once wisdom or once counsel leaves the children, nisrecha chachmasan shal umos ha'olam. The wisdom of the nations of the world grows putrid as well. In other words, Rabbi Shimon Hanani was saying is, if I'm not going to be here to protect you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make sure that no one from the nations of the world is here to start up with you. The other possibilities from here. This is by Yaakov and Esav. So Esav says that Esav and Yaakov, the way it works is Esav only has power when Yaakov has the ability to travel alongside of him. But now that at the end of the day, Rabbi Shimon Hanani says, I won't be here, there won't be any apikarsim to start up with you, up until the time that there is a proper champion to defend you. Rav Ila have a salik bedarga debe Rabba bar Shila. So Rabbi Ila was walking up the stairs in the house of Rabba bar Shila. Shami the Yanuka Davikari, he always says, so beautiful. He heard a young child who was reading the following pasuk. The pasuk here is from Amos. Ki hine yotzer harim obore ruach umagid la'adam masicho. Literally, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one who creates the mountains, right? He fashions the mountains, he creates the wind, and he tells man what his conversation is. Tells man what his conversation is. So Rabbi Ila hears this and he says, Amar, Evet Sherabo Magilo Masicho, Takani Yeshlo. Tell me if the master recounts every conversation of the servant. Is there any hope for the servant? My masicho, what conversation is referring to? Amarav, afilu sicha yisira sheben ishli ishto magidim lo adam b'shas misa. Even the small talk between a husband and wife, is retold before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when a person dies. In other words, when a person leaves this world, not only are my actions reviewed, but every word that I said used, and even words said in the most intimate of moments. Rashi says over here, Sicha Yisera, Divrei Schok Shalifnei Tashmish. Even words exchanged by a husband and wife during their most intimate moments, right? Even during their sexual relationship, even those words that are exchanged then, those words are retold before the Beis Din Shamala. Those words are retold before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ini, is that so? So listen to this. So the Gemara tells us that this is actually a pretty wild story. Rav Kahana to say the Rav Kahana once hid under the bed of Rav. I will say a very strange story. Rav Kahana hid under the bed of Rav because he wanted to see how his Rebbe conducted himself in moments of intimacy. Apparently he was a Talmud. He wanted to learn everything about his Rebbe. V'shama disach v'tzachak v'asa tzrachav. And he heard that Rav, when he was intimate with his wife, spoke with his wife. And again, words of intimacy, caused her to laugh. They laughed together. And then they had relations. So Rav Kahana's under the bed. I will say, it is what it is, right? Rav Kahana is under the bed, and Rav Kahana is under the bed. He hears what's going on, and he begins to speak to Rav. Amar dame pume de Rav kimandalo timely tafshila. The mouth of the master sounds like someone who never had anything to eat. In other words, what Rav Kahana was saying to Rav is, you talk and your excitement and the words that you're using are like you never had relations before. So listen to this. Rav, here's Rav Kahana's under the bed. Amar le Kahana, Puk. First thing is, Kahana, get out of here. We're not having this conversation. Now get out of here. Get out of here. Lav orachara. This is not normal. I value my relationship with my Talmidim, but not this much. We could have conversations in the Beis Medrash, but this is not the place for you to be. Get out of here. Puk. Lav orachara. So I'll say, so leaving aside that story, the point over here, what do you see from this story? You see from this story that Rav said what we call divrei ritzui, that Rav didn't just engage in the act of relations, right? Rav didn't just have relations with his wife. There was a setting of the mood. And the setting of the mood requires words. And the setting of the words requires a whole bunch of behaviors in order for the act to be pleasurable and meaningful. To which the Gemara says, Lokashya, kan de tzarach l'ratzuye, kan de lo tzarach l'ratzuye. We will say this is part of a different discussion, which is actually quite fascinating. You know, from a halachic perspective, a man has an obligation of intimacy towards his wife. And that obligation really finds expression in that the man is obligated to make sure that his wife gets pleasure from intimacy. This is an incredibly important yesod, because to a certain degree, often it stands in contradistinction to how greater society sees a sexual relationship. Right? In society, intimacy, sexual relations is about gratification. I have a need, I have a desire, I have a want. My goal is to satisfy that desire. And it's incredible. In halacha, that's not the way it is in halacha. A man's obligation is to make sure that his wife gets pleasure from the act of intimacy. That's his obligation. It's not just a nice thing for a man to satisfy his wife in an intimate relationship. That's the halachic obligation that a man has. Shulchan Aruch, that's the obligation that a man has. So therefore, again, a man has to know his wife and has to understand how she could find pleasure through this intimate relationship. So sometimes, again, it's through words, sometimes it's through touch, so it's through all different things. So the Gemara says something amazing. So the Gemara says that whatever a husband has to do and whatever he has to say, right, or whatever mood he has to set in order for his wife to find pleasure and to get pleasure in relations, that's halachically appropriate. There are certain things that could be inappropriate. We know this. Like, for example, again, the Gemara discusses that a man is not supposed to think about another woman during relations. So let's say speaking about another woman to one's wife during relations, that's inappropriate. That's inappropriate. And that's when the Gemara says that ultimately, again, if there are inappropriate discussions that happen during intimacy, that I'm held accountable for. And those conversations are replayed after 120. But of course, but conversations that are necessary in order to set the right tone. Conversations that are necessary in order to create an atmosphere of intimacy. Conversations that are necessary in order to allow one's wife to have pleasure from the act of intimacy. That's not only okay, but the halacha says ultimately obligatory. Good. I don't know what happened the next day in Shir with Rav Kahana and Rav. I don't know, but it must have been interesting. The Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara goes weiter. Vim lo tishma b'mistarim. So the Gemara goes weiter. Vim lo sishmo b'mistarim. Tifke nafshi negeva. So the pasuk over here says, if you do not listen, literally translated means if you do not listen with the hidden things, ultimately, again, tifka nafshi, my soul will cry mipnei gava because of the arrogance. What does this mean? Amar Rav Shalom bar Ina mishmei derav makom yeshla HaKadosh Baruch Hu mistarim shmo. There is a place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, and its name is mistarim. And this is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? My mipnei gava. What does it mean because of gava? Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak mipnei ga'avasan shel Yisrael shenitla mehem v'nit lavodakam. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries over the fact that the honor of Klal Yisrael was taken, the grandeur of Klal Yisrael was taken and was given to the nations of the world. This is important. When we suffer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries as well. Roshel bar Nachmani Amar mipnei ga'avasa shel malchus shamayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries because the greatness of his monarchy has been removed. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu realizes that when we are downtrodden, the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is diminished as well. To which the Gemara says, Miya kabechia kamei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, does HaKadosh Baruch Hu cry? Rav Papa ein atzivus lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Rav Papa says there is no sadness in the presence of Hashem. Shene'emar hod v'hadar lefanov, oz v'chedva bimkomo. Pasuk says, grandeur and greatness is before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Oz v'chedva, strength and joy. So we'll say it depends. HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries in an inner chamber, doesn't cry in an outer chamber. Obate Brailo, is that true? In the outer chamber he doesn't cry? Vaksiv vayikra Hashem tzivakos b'yom hu b'chil misped ulekarcha lechagar sak. So I will say here again, it seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was crying even in the outer chamber. Shiny Churban Beis Hamikdash dafilu malachi shalom bachu. It's different. The Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. It's different. Why? Because when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, even the malachim cry. Shnei Amar Hein elim tzaku chutza malachi shalom mariv kain. I will say when even the malachim are crying, everyone is crying for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Anyone and everyone is crying. So even the Ribono Shel Olam cries, not only in his inner chamber, but in his outer chamber as well. I will say what an incredible and overwhelming yesod. That when we suffer, the Ribono Shel Olam suffers as well. Sometimes the greatest difficulty in suffering is a feeling of isolation and being alone. But know that when a Yid suffers, when a Jew suffers, when we undergo adversity or difficulty as individuals or as a nation, the Ribono Shel Olam always suffers along with us. Sometimes he's only crying in his inner chamber, but sometimes he's crying with us in his outer chamber as well. This, of course, is the ultimate message of hope and redemption, because again, we know that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is suffering along with us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to allow his personal state of suffering to endure. And because he's going to remedy his divine suffering, we know that our suffering will be alleviated alongside his. Halavai, we should be zocheh Mir Hashem to experience that. Mihira b'yameinu. Amen. Right, so we'll have to stop over here for today. A lot to do. Incredible Gemara. Wishing everyone a wonderful day and shkoyach.